Hi, I'm Todd Kerns from Slash featuring Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators, Tuke, Heroes and Monsters. You are watching Sonic Perspectives.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another interview of Sonic Perspectives. I'm Rodrigo, and my guest today is Todd Kerns. Todd has played with Slash for a number of years. He's in the band called Tuke and has a new project called Heroes and Monsters. Todd, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. How exciting.
It's all right.
Where are you at?
I'm in Toronto, actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I was just up in Hamilton just before Christmas.
Were you?
Yeah,
we
just before all the weather went completely sideways. Yeah.
We're lucky this year. It's cold, of course, but very little snow. So
yeah, that is good. That's good. How long you been in Toronto?
6 years. It'll be 6 years next April. Yeah.
Oh wow, where from originally?
Originally from Brazil.
Oh, cool. That's amazing. Wow, how'd you end up in Toronto? Sorry, I'm interviewing you now.
Well, Brazil is a great country to visit. I don't know. You played there a couple of times, right?
Many times. Yes.
Yeah. It's awesome if you go as a tourist, but to raise a child and have a life there, it's complicated from a political standpoint, economical.
Right.
So we're here. We're happy.
Yeah, understandable. I totally get it. Yeah, it's a whole other animal. But Toronto's such a great melting pot of multiple cultures and just everybody. It's a great place to be and a great place to raise a family.
Yeah, you're from Saskatchewan, right?
Originally from Saskatchewan, but I lived in Vancouver for a long time before moving to the States. I didn't really move. I just kind of call it a relocation of sorts.
Temporary, permanently temporary kind of thing.
Tim Hortons.
There you go. Gotta have it.
Yeah, it was just sort of like came down for some gigs, and then you know how it goes. It's next thing you know, you're Vegas has a way of sinking its hooks into you. So
right.
I have no complaints. It's been nothing but good to me.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, I feel like my intro only scratched the surface of what you do, but let's start with Heroes and Monsters. How did this band get together?
Well, that's a weird one because of COVID and all that. We were a lot of us were sitting around not doing much of anything, and Will Hunt reached out. I haven't really been super clear on the timeline because when we think about it, that seems so long ago, but it's not really that long ago. The initial conversation sort of came up just from sitting around not doing much of anything, and then it was hey, we're knocking some ideas around, and I'm like, send it on over, dude. Like I'm like literally on the couch watching Tiger King and not doing much of anything. So then it was just sort of, one song turned into 10, and the next thing you know, you have a record. And that's pretty much where we're at.
Yeah. Well, and I like the idea of a rock trio, Motorhead, Rush, and Danko Jones, who are also from Canada, where I am. Was that by design?
The Police. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's like, I don't know if it was by design. I know that Will, in thinking about it, was sort of like, I think everybody sort of thinks about it in terms of what's the easiest way to make these kind of things work. And if you're looking for a bass player and you're looking for a vocalist, then it sort of becomes kind of like, well, what if we just got both in one person? And I really enjoyed it. I haven't been in a power trio since my high school days, when my first band that went from high school into on the road was a 3-piece. I played bass and sang, and so it's kind of weird to consider that it took this long to kind of come full circle again. But it's a lot of fun for me. I love to sing, and I'm pretty practiced and pretty skilled at being able to kind of split my brain, and this plays bass and this sings the songs, because sometimes they're not. I'm learning even during the course of this record. Now I'm going back and learning songs that to play them live, and going, these bass lines aren't necessarily compatible with being sung over. But you don't really think about that when you're writing. You're just kind of coming up with stuff, and then you sing, and then you really have to kind of do that thing where Geddy or say Sting, those kind of guys they were just so good at
amazing, right?
Being able to do that, and it's something that I am not in the league of either of those guys, but it's something that I always sort of reach for is the idea of being able to sing and play things at the same time. And it's a challenge. Even in the Slash band, like, you know, when I'm singing with Myles, there are things that are not compatible to be singing those harmonies, but you don't think of it when you're in the studio. You don't think about it until you're on stage or until your rehearsals, and you're like, oh wow, how am I going to do this? So then you just sort of adjust the parts, or, you know, whether it's the vocal parts or the bass, you kind of have to, sometimes I have to dumb things down just to make it all work. But it's fun. It's a really fun challenge.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. And speaking about a few songs on the album, I don't know if Locked and Loaded was actually the first song that you guys wrote, but it feels almost like a mission statement from the band.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because it really is the first song they sent over.
There you go.
and it was, yeah, it was sort of this kind of like, I mean, it sort of has this sort of ridiculous kind of John Wick type thing going on, like, you know, you're coming at me and I'm going to, but I don't think it was so much meant to be quite like an action movie as much as just sort of, like you say, like a kind of, whether it's from a career or sort of like being counted out, or, and even in the position we were in, like sort of like sitting in the middle of the pandemic, people were kind of like, we're never going to tour again. This is it. You know, we're all going to be stuck, you know, at home, which is 100% why it all happened anyway. Cause it's like, I'm sitting at home going like, well, if I can't tour and I can't play live, well, then I can write and record. So boom, that's what kind of happened. So in a lot of ways, that's kind of what that is more signifying, is sort of this, you know, I'm still ready to go do this and kick some ass, but not necessarily in an action hero type sense. I'm absolutely not qualified for any sort of action hero.
Right. And I think there's a lot of punk energy in a couple of songs like Raw Power and Set Me Free as well. Another example of it, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that's how you started in the business, right? With the punk influence kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say, you know, kind of, you know, that's the funny thing, coming from a small area like I come from. I come from a small town, and we didn't really have that kind of like, these are the punk rock guys, those are the metal guys, these are the thrash guys, hair metal. Like everything in the bigger cities was so compartmentalized that, you know, goth kids and jocks, and I would watch movies about those sort of like different groups, and I kind of wouldn't understand, because we would be like just this small town of like kids that just liked everything, you know what I mean? What we liked and stuff that we didn't like, where we just didn't pay attention to it. So that would mean at the same party you'd be listening to ZZ Top and Iggy Pop and Duran Duran. Weird stuff would just pop in, or the Cure, or the Smiths, and then the thrash metal and everything else that kind of came down the pipeline. I think we become more discerning as we get older, like when into high school and all that kind of stuff, and senior high, and become more adults. Then you become sort of like, this is what I do. I love playing rock and roll. You know, I was always sort of very into Kiss and Cheap Trick and the New York Dolls. That was kind of my jam. Like guitars, you know, it rocks, but it's like, it's pop. It got some pop sensibilities in the songs. You can sing along. You can really kind of enjoy that. And that sort of, I think, translates, you know, all the way down my whole career, I think.
Yeah. Well, we get a song like Let's Ride It on this album. Like it has that anthemic quality in the chorus, you know, a song that you can sing along to in an arena kind of thing, right? Which is a totally different spectrum, right?
That's exactly what, you know, when putting it together, that has elements of, I suppose, The Sweet and Cheap Trick and maybe some early Queen, you know, those kind of things that, you know, I think that it's very natural for, you know, when everybody kind of says, you know, they're writing songs for themselves. Of course, you're writing songs for yourselves, but when you come up with a chorus like that, that's kind of like, you know, you feel like you're spilling beer, singing along with your friends, and you kind of go, I think we're onto something here. I think that feels good. I think it feels like, you know, how an audience should be, you know, celebrating in that music, and let's ride it, and let's, you know, that whole thing was. It just felt like a lot of fun, and it's fun to play, it's fun to sing, and it's fun to hopefully fun to listen to.
Yeah, and I'm curious about Blame. It's one that stood out for me. There's lots of tempo changes in that one.
Yeah, I know. That one's actually, when I was just talking about trying to split your brain from music. I'm holding a slide for some reason. the splitting your brain into the bass and the singing. That's one of those songs that's really challenging me now because of, as you mentioned, some of the prog aspects of my bandmates who are so much smarter than I am, you know, trying to come up with like, how do I play and sing this at the same time? So that's my current challenge. So hopefully by February 9th, I figured that out. But
there's
yeah,
still some time. Yeah.
Yeah, there's still some time. So there's a lot going on as far as the changes into the pre-chorus and all that. Suddenly will kind of shift into this new time signature of sorts, you know. And that's not my natural wheelhouse at all. I'm sort of like a rock and roll guy. But I really enjoy the challenge of somebody throwing something at me that's out of my comfort zone. It's sort of it's something I'm sort of it's almost like a weakness. It's kind of like, it's almost like if something's really, really easy and really sort of simple for me, I kind of go like, okay, cool. But when it's like a little bit of a challenge, I kind of go, okay, well, now I have to tackle that. I have to figure out how to make this work. So that's kind of where I'm at currently with that song. But yeah, there's a lot going on in that song. It's a very interesting song, for lack of better words, you know?
Yeah. And I think, well, the album is 39 minutes long, just short of 40 minutes long. Honestly, I really like that. I'm from an era where bands didn't need to have all 74 minutes of a CD full of songs. You know, Van Halen 2 is 32 minutes long.
100%.
Spears is 36 minutes long. Right?
There you go. You're speaking my language, because I think that as time has gone by, you know, in listening to, you know, records like Nine Inch Nails, The Fragile, or, you know, the big Smashing Pumpkins record, I just remember there being a lot of like every possible amount of space was filled with music. And I appreciate that. I understand the need to do that. But I kind of felt like, as much of a fan as I was of those particular records, I felt like I never gave the end of the record as much attention as it probably deserved, the amount of time Trent Reznor spent on The Fragile. And I did exactly the same thing as you. I would go back and listen to Rock and Roll Over or the Ramones and Van Halen. I mean, the Van Halen first couple albums are like 8 songs or something like that. And it's like, how can you go wrong with like 8, you know, amazing tracks? So
exactly.
In the last Slash record, we did 10 songs. I mean, Slash was sort of leaning into, even after like World on Fire was 17 songs, and and, you know, we'd written a whole ton of songs, and the intention was to release some of them. But Slash was like, let's just put them all out. And I was like, damn, okay. Well, it'd be like a double, triple album if it was vinyl, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then with this, it was kind of like, yeah, let's just, like, you know, pare it down, you know. And the idea of throwing a cover song like Set Me Free by The Sweet was sort of like, you know, like another Van Halen reference of like, well, you know, Van Halen's first album, and most of their albums, you know, there was a cover track to kind of like, you know, to I suppose when you're listening to something fresh, you've never heard any of these songs, once in a while, it's kind of good to hear You Really Got Me or whatever, and go, oh, that's cool, you know. So I think that there was a lot of that kind of mentality with those records that we grew up on, and all that kind of thing was sort of the overall mission statement in a sense, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of Slash, I know everyone in the band is really busy, but what are the current plans? There was only a short run to promote the last record.
Yeah, it was too short, frankly. It was barely enough to even kind of whet our appetite. But I mean, this year is going to be weird. I mean, we're all jam-packed with activity. So I think probably this year we might be doing some stuff, but I think it'll be behind the scenes. I don't think it's going to be on stage. 2024, we plan on, you know, there are loose plans to try and do something, but it's just too early to really tell. When you start talking about 2024, I'm like, dude, I'm barely used to saying 2023. So it's kind of like, you know, so it's kind of like I'm just waiting to hear where everybody's at. I know, you know, Guns got really busy. Most of it was because of, you know, when you consider 2020 and 2021, the schedules that were supposed to be and didn't happen, that when they finally opened the world in 2022, we had all these commitments that we all had to make up for. And that I'm as guilty as anybody else with Tuke and everything else that I had to do. And Brent and I, most of the things I do are with Brent in one sense or another. So, and then you got Wolfgang's Mammoth, and you've got Alter Bridge, Miles' solo stuff, Guns N' Roses. It's all tough. And it seems very rare these days that, you know, there's like a band like Aerosmith, and it's just Aerosmith. No one else has as much else, you know. I mean, there's a Joe Perry Project or whatever, or Hollywood Vampires, but it's sort of built upon like, if there's a break, we'll go do something else. But Aerosmith is sort of the commitment. And until that sort of presents itself, in the meantime, we just kind of like, everybody just does whatever they want to do until it's time to, hey, what are you doing? Let's get together and put it together, you know?
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I'll be honest, I live in Canada, like we discussed, but I haven't heard of Tuke until recently. I know you guys did a tour last summer, but what are the current plans for the band?
We are doing February 4th and 5th, I believe. No, 3rd and 4th in Alberta. So I'm not,
Okay.
I should know better than I do, but my schedule is so ridiculous. I have a calendar back there with nothing written on it because I'm not professional enough to do that. But I should have, so Tuke has new music kind of always bubbling. A lot of it it depends on scheduling as well. Cause like every other thing that I do, we have Shania Twain and stuff like that kind of dictates what's going to be the bigger picture for our band. Currently, we have Monsters of Rock happening in April, the cruise, and that's looking like it's going to go forward. And so we are busy, just in a kind of like, again, based upon availability and everybody's schedule. It's a crazy thing in 2023, in the 21st century. The idea of being 23 years old and putting together Aerosmith or Kiss or something like that, and that's your whole life, suddenly
Right,
you're in your 60s and 70s and you're still in the same band. I think that's such a blessing. I can't imagine having that as my life, but that didn't quite go the way, that didn't go that way for me. So in the meantime, I feel lucky enough that when the Slash thing goes on hiatus, I just end up kind of filling my time with whatever the hell I want to do. Basically. And it's hard to say no to things when it's kind of like, you know what, that sounds like fun, man, that sounds like a blast, let's go do that, let's go, and that's sort of how this entire thing works in my life. Is just sort of like, that sounds like fun, if we can make it work in the calendar, let's do it. If it doesn't work, then it just can't happen. So but I tend to try and make all these things work. At the time during the lockdown, when something like Heroes and Monsters comes up, it was sort of like, I'm not doing anything else. I'm literally, we were making some Tuke music, but even then it was kind of like, we had no idea what's going to happen with that or what's going to happen. So I was literally like, yeah, let's do that. Now that the world's reopened, it seems insane that, that there's the Bruce Kulick band and basically you take Slash and the gang out of the equation for a second. The Bruce band becomes what we do on Kiss cruises and intermittently once in a while throughout the year. Tuke becomes one of those things, again, based on availability throughout the year. And Heroes and Monsters 100% based on availability. You got the drummer from Evanescence in there. It's like, his schedule alone is bananas. And then, it's just all based upon like, that sounds like fun. And then when I'm home, I'm tomorrow night, I'm going over to the Rio here in Vegas, and I'm going to play with Raiding the Rock Ball because it's a blast and I love all those guys. So I just love getting on stage and raging with whoever will have me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Raiding the Rock Ball, there's a resurgence of interest in that kind of music, right? I guess it sells out every night, and you see things like the Trans-Siberian Orchestra drawing crowds and bigger crowds every year. To what do you credit that? I don't know. There seems to be a resurgence of some kind.
I think it's really interesting. I remember 10, 15 years ago, I remember like some kid walking up to me and going like, do you know the song Mississippi Queen? And I'm like, how the hell do you know the song? 10-year-old kid. I'm like, how do you know Mississippi Queen? I barely know that song. I was like, that was an old song when I was 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's like, from Guitar Hero. I go, of course. There's something very interesting about the Guitar Hero experience. I just literally know people who got to know Slash and got to start playing guitar and got into rock and roll because of Guitar Hero.
Yeah,
they kind of found Slash in some sort of computer animated form and then found him as who he is, And so I wouldn't sort of equate all of that to that, but I think that there's something to be said about everything from Guardians of the Galaxy soundtracks to everything else, where classic rock sort of continues to find its own
niche.
And continues to. I think that it's an interesting world to have lived in. Like in doing stuff like the Rock Vault, they'll dig into like, let's do Smoke on the Water and Stairway to Heaven. And I remember being like a kid and going, let's play some cover songs, anything but Smoke on the Water and Stairway to Heaven. And you'd be like, yeah, totally. And then I'm doing the show and I'm going like, who wants to hear these songs? And you realize these people,
everyone.
everyone wants to hear these songs. And I've been playing those songs like literally when they say, can we do those songs? I'm like, yeah, they're just in here. You know what I mean? Like I'm not sitting at home going like, okay, Smoke on the Water. I'm like,
how do I play that?
I just know them because when I was like 12, 11, 10, 15 years old, I was playing them the entire time, listening to them like crazy. And then there's an audience from people from Minnesota and, from Wyoming and all over the place come to Vegas. And they're like, no way. I love the Eagles, and you go, okay, Hotel California, here we go. It's like, you can't lose.
Yeah, of course. And I guess the same can be said about the Kiss cruise, right? And I know planning, like you play some obscure stuff on the cruise, right?
Yeah, not obscure to the people on the Kiss cruise, though. Not at all. Of course.
Yeah. Like the Elder and stuff like that, or...
Oh, yeah. I mean, you cannot dig deep enough. That's the one thing I've learned about the Kiss cruise is the fans on that cruise. It's essentially a Star Trek convention for Kiss fans. You know what I mean? It's literally these people... And I'm including myself in that group. I mean, there's a lot of nonsense in this room that could, well, here, this is the my current reading source is a book about the Elder. So
nice. Yeah. Very cool.
So it's kind of like, it's just like and no one wants to go on a Kiss cruise and hear Rock and Roll All Night, Detroit Rock City, Shout It Out Loud. I mean, we all love those songs, but we've heard them. We'll hear the real guys do those songs. So when we do it, it's kind of more based upon Bruce's era, Bruce's chapter, and that includes a lot of what we would consider, I guess deep cuts, but they're not to the people in the audience. It's like they love all that stuff. When we first did it, we did it with Bob Kulick before he had passed away. And we were doing stuff off of Paul Stanley's solo album and all that non-makeup Kiss, and people could not be happier. I mean, doing Nowhere to Run from Kiss Killers and stuff like that was you couldn't go wrong. It was just like exactly what these people wanted. And we've continued to dig deep. We were doing like King of Hearts from Hot in the Shade and all these kind of songs that to me as a fan, I know all this stuff, but every time we go to learn something, I go, are we pushing it, like doing Time Traveler, a demo that was never released? No, they love it. They're really happy to hear almost anything. So I'm like, you really can't do anything wrong as long as you kind of like do it with passion and do it well.
Yeah, for sure. And well, back to Heroes and Monsters. I know you guys have a few shows booked in Italy. What is next after that? I mean, when can we hear about more tour dates?
Well, there'll be another single at some point after that. But tour dates wise, we are sort of like in a holding pattern again, waiting to hear what Will's schedule is like. I know eventually Stef gets busy with Vasco Rossi, and that sort of puts us in a weird predicament as far as I mean, it's the story of my life right now. Is like, hey, let's go do this, and it's like, oh, he's busy with that. Okay, cool, I'll go do this. You know, and it's just kind of a holding pattern, waiting to hear. But I'm sure there'll be a window of opportunity at some point. I mean, that's the cool thing about being able to have a lot of
outlets,
a lot of outlets, and I think being the ability to be a singer, to be a guitar player, to be a bass player, to be all these different things has sort of put me in a position where I'm kind of like, if someone comes at me, and trust me, it wasn't that long ago, there was a friend of mine, probably 10, 15 years ago, we were entertaining the idea of putting together like a 2-piece kind of garage rock kind of fun thing, and I was going to play drums, and it's like, I really regret not having done that, but I was so busy back then, touring with Slash, that it was like, I couldn't possibly have sort of, let's do that, and then I'll see you in 6 months, and then run off. But it's the kind of thing that's the kind of stuff that whenever something like that comes along, I go, geez, that'd be a lot of fun, and I think that's sort of the stuff that really gets me, is that sounds like a lot of fun.
Right.
It's like, it's either going to be fun, rewarding, good for your career, or pays you a lot of money. It's like, those are the reasons to do things. And I sort of, I always lean towards the fun part, I mean, the time I enjoy with the people I'm playing with and all that kind of stuff, that's way more important to me than anything else.
Of course. Well, my last question is, in terms of set list, what else would you play on a 1-hour set for Heroes and Monsters? Like maybe a few songs from the other bands you're involved with, or
I don't know, actually. We really want to focus on the record, and then maybe a couple of like bizarre cover songs. We really been entertaining the idea of what to do. And I think that, a lot of people are like, you should do this song by, SMKC, Slash and the guys. And I'm like, that's weird. I think it's kind of weird for me to be singing songs that Myles sang and all that kind of stuff. You never know. I'm kind of like, I'm open to the idea of like, again, of it being interesting and being something, you know, off the wall and a little bit kind of different. So I would expect probably some pretty weird stuff in there. Or weird,
Right.
weird being good. I mean, in a
Right.
good way, but like sort of unexpected kind of stuff.
Awesome. I can't wait. I hope you guys make it to Toronto. So I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Me
Right?
too. I hope at the very least, I hope Tuke can make our way to Toronto. We've had stuff booked out in your neck of the woods pre-COVID. We were supposed to be out there, but that threw everything up and ever since then we've been trying to get that back, you know, trying to get back on track. So hopefully we'll make that happen sooner than later.
Fingers crossed. All right. Thank you so much, man. Thank you for the
Thank
interview.
you, brother. Happy 2023 and hope to see you out there sometime.
Same for you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care, brother.